When I say my guest is amazing, I'm serious. I'm talking amazing. We have the amazing Kreskin. I have to throw this out. First of all, he's been on 118 Mike Douglas shows, 98 Merv Griffins, a record 88 Johnny Carson shows, The Tonight Show. In the 1970s, he had a show on television called The Amazing World of Kreskin. In the 1980s, he had Kreskin's Quest, a series of internationally syndicated programs and specials. You go on forever, but I'll tell you one thing that fascinated me. At age 5, he actually was performing magic for his neighborhood, for the neighborhood children.
Poor kids.
You're killing me already. At age 11, he studied the entire psychology section of his local library. Let me tell you about reading. This guy reads 4 books a day, and he can read a novel in 15 minutes. He's actually banned at some of the casinos because the guy can memorize 4 decks of cards at once. You want to talk about amazing? I read through the book, The Secrets of the Amazing Kreskin. I'm reading all these different stories, and a lot of them are some common sense, but sometimes we aren't aware of the powers that we don't use. In a whole chapter dedicated to the mind, and I went to people to talk about how much power we don't, less than 3% we use.
Like like an iceberg. You know, an iceberg, the majority of an iceberg is below the water, and if anyone questions the power of an iceberg, we think of the Titanic and something like that. There's a great power there, and this is why people like, you know, Edison, everybody knew that Edison... Sure, everybody talks they only slept 3 or 4 hours a night, but that's misinformation for children and people who like to quote it. He still got 7, 8 hours sleep. He took endless cat naps, but he thought to himself, heck, I'm sleeping 1/3 of my life. Why don't I use it constructively? So his workers got used to him lying down on the laboratory table.
He got a cot there, right?
And he woke up with answers to problems.
Right.
And any wise person listening, anyone with wisdom should always sleep with a pad next to them, always.
Tape recorder.
Or a tape recorder, or, God forbid, a computer. I can't teach people, Barry, to become a mentalist or a thought reader, because the only way I can compare it is with the lifestyle of an athlete. As you know, to achieve in anything extraordinarily, you have to commit your life to it. Mm-hmm. The best tip I can give is something that people are going to have to practice doing, because out of 1,000 people, you only find 3 or 4 doing it. When you're with people sometime that you're dealing with, for God's sakes, shut up and listen. And also, listen to the silence. And when you're with someone that you're comfortable with, it could be a lover, it could be a business person that you're dining with, once in a while, stop talking, because if you wait long enough, they'll talk to you not only in what's on their mind, but on what they don't say. You got to stop talking once in a while and listen and feel. You'll begin to think, hey, wait a minute. He just told me what's really on his mind. I wasn't paying attention. I just found out something. I've been sitting here for 2 hours. So listen sometime, even silently.
There can be no discussion about human potential without discussion of the human mind. The mind is, as everybody knows, what separates us from all other species. No other living beings, though they contain hearts, lungs, stomachs, eyes, ears, mouths, and even brains, have the power of the human mind. No other living beings have the ability to change their surroundings and their circumstances based on how they change themselves. Only we have the extraordinary power of transformation. We can start out poor and end up wealthy, change ourselves from illiterate to highly educated, and turn handicaps into advantages by using this wondrous tool handed out free to each and every one of us. Science is just beginning to understand how this amazing tool works. Human beings have existed for about 2.5 million years, yet we are still in the infant stages of discovery in the remarkable field of brain research. 95% of what we do know has been discovered within the past 50 years. We are learning more every day, but there is still a huge amount yet to be discovered. Even scientists are in awe of how the mind functions. In his book, Bright Air, Brilliant Fire, Gerald Edelman marvels at the patterns in which brain cells are arranged, and says that when we consider both the number and the arrangement of these cells in the object the size of your brain, as well as the chemical reactions going on inside, we are talking about the most complicated material object in the known universe. This most complicated material object has been given to each and every one of us. It seems then almost sacrilegious not to take advantage of its vast powers. It doesn't take genius or paranormal senses to tap into these powers. We all do it every day. As you listen to this program, you are hearing about many successful individuals who have learned to appreciate and utilize these powers. You'll notice that each of the 50 people interviewed in this program has his or her own definition of success. Many of them mentioned, of course, the amenities of life, money, possessions, a comfortable lifestyle. But these are only byproducts of what success really means to them. Satisfaction with their life, doing what they love to do, setting goals and achieving them, meeting challenges head-on, achieving a balance between work and personal priorities, spending time with family, and giving back to others, for example. Each definition is individual, unique, and personal. That's because each definition is based on one person's life experience and perception of the world, as well as his or her genetic makeup. No two people can possibly see the world in exactly the same light, because no two people, not even identical twins, have exactly the same combination of genetic makeup and life experience. No two minds function in exactly the same way. The average brain, which weighs about 3 pounds and is the size of 2 fists, contains over 100 billion nerve cells or neurons. These neurons are constantly sending messages back and forth to each other. The way this message service functions differs in every individual. There's no use in comparing yourself with others around you and thinking that they're better than you because they can do some things you can't. Some people may have skills and abilities you do not. We each have our individual gifts. It's up to you to find and appreciate the gifts that have been bestowed upon you. Your gifts are unlike any others, and you are the only one who can uncover them, develop them, and make them work for you. There is one simple way to help your gifts work for you, and it is one of the most common signposts of success. All the people interviewed for this program were able to see themselves as being successful even before they reached their goals. They've always had a vision of success that they kept constantly in their mind's eye. You become what you think about. There is no greater secret to success than this. It's what keeps me fired up. I constantly think about those things that I love to do and those people I love to be around. I study everything I get my hands on about my business and about how I can improve myself and my life. I'm on a rampage of learning. I try to absorb as much as I can around me and then apply it to my life 110%. You become what you think about. Set your mind to almost anything and you can achieve it. As the saying goes, if you argue for your limitations, you get to keep them. Tell yourself that you're too young, too old, too dumb, the wrong gender, the wrong race, the wrong height, or the wrong weight to achieve, and you will be right. There are, of course, limits beyond which human beings cannot go. We can't transform ourselves into other species or grow extra limbs when we need them. But each of us has within ourselves a great potential that can be reached if we so desire. Inventors, explorers, mathematicians, artists, entertainers, politicians, humanitarians, entrepreneurs, authors, athletes, teachers, scientists, they're all human beings, nothing more, nothing less, except that they've achieved what they thought about most. This power of vision is given to all of us. The power of the subconscious mind is so strong that it really doesn't care what is true and what is false. In fact, the brain doesn't effectively discriminate between real and imagined events. We believe both in things that are real and things that are not. But we can use this phenomenon to our advantage. As I once heard a winning football coach say, treat a person as he is and he will remain as he is. Treat him as if he were what he could be and should be, and he will become what he could and should be. Treat yourself as you could and should be, and you will surpass your own imagination. If you think about a positive outcome, you have a much better chance of achieving success than if you picture a possible failure. This is how self-fulfilling prophecies are born. If you think you're successful, you are. If you think you're a failure, you are. You can determine much of what goes into your subconscious mind by controlling your environment. Of course, you can't always control outside circumstances 100%, but you can surround yourself with positive influences. A maxim in the computer world says, garbage in, garbage out. That goes for the mind as well. You can use your great power of vision to keep yourself stuck and limited, or you can use it to visualize a plan for success. Neil Mackenzie, a young man who challenges himself in World Championship motorcycle racing, is the most successful British rider in Grand Prix racing since 1988. He's raced on tracks where the bikes reach speeds of more than 200 miles per hour. Mackenzie trains year-round for his sport, running, mountain biking, and cycling. But when the season begins, his mind is totally focused on racing. Here's what he does.
At the racetrack, I make a lot of laps in my head. I think about areas where I might be stronger than other riders, or weaker, or where I can improve. I think about the race and where a good place to pass might be, or where someone might pass me. I think about the bike and I feel it going around the racetrack. And when I finish one race, I immediately start thinking about the next racetrack I'm going to and start making laps in my head again.
Successful people know how to tap into this incredible source of power and energy. This doesn't mean that they have genius IQs or are necessarily any smarter than the rest of us. It does mean that they've learned how to think and that they believe in their own ability to solve problems rationally and creatively. Bruce Jenner overcame dyslexia and learning disabilities as a kid and became an American hero. Over the years, he learned to appreciate and take advantage of his own special abilities. Here's his secret.
I got a bad start. I had no confidence in myself at all. But I found out as time went on that my greatest asset was my brain. I wasn't as physically talented as all the other guys, but I was the guy who brought out the best with what I had. When other guys would fold, I would always rise to the top. It's not because I was stronger than they were or because I was faster than them. It's because I was mentally confident.
This kind of mental confidence applies not only to sports, but to every profession and every area of life. In many respects, the brain is a muscle like any other in the body and requires that we use it or lose it. Our society has given up some of its brain power. We've neglected our responsibility to give our youngsters a head start in learning. Dr. Fred Plum, chairman of neurology and neuroscience at the Cornell Medical Center and member of the National Panel for Research in the Decade of the Brain, describes the situation this way.
The single most important thing we can do to improve the opportunities of a child and improve the health of a nation is to start all children with a formal education somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 24 months. Look at what the brain learns in the first 2.5 years. It learns to walk, talk, answer questions, be conscious of itself. Some children learn to read at 3 years of age. Parents should take maximum advantage of the fact that every day when they come home from work, their child's brain is going to be different than it was when they left in the morning. Connections are being made. The more connections that are made, the more one learns. And the more one learns as a child, the more channels are going to be open as an adult.
When I went to Dr. Fred Plum at Cornell Medical Center, and I sat down with him after several letters and phone calls, because you got to go through a lot of red tape to get this guy. He used to work on Nixon. He was one of the best neurologists in the world. I sat down with him, and I wanted to interview him as a successful doctor. And he declined. He said, I don't want to do the interview. And I said, why not? And he goes, well, I'll tell you why. I don't want to talk about my success. I don't think that's important. He says, well, whatever you want to talk about. So let's get something out of this. So he said, well, I'd like to talk about address the parents of the nation. That's where it comes first. And let me tell you a few things what you people should do with their children. And he started talking, and I had a 3-month-old daughter at the time, and he started talking about how many times we don't realize that you read to them, even when they're in the womb. You talk to them. They pick up sounds, vowels, the voice. They recognize that. At 3 months of age, he says to read my daughter, I thought it was nuts. They pick up vowels, sounds. They see colors. And it begets a process of bonding. And get them away from the television, the most non-interactive, passive medium in the world. These brains are like sponges. The plasticity of a brain at an early age, it absorbs information 50 times faster than we do later on in life. In the right and left hemisphere of the brain, if the right hemisphere is damaged up to the age of 8, the left hemisphere takes over and compensates for the skills that are used by that right hemisphere. How we treat kids, take them out to museums, they told me. You know, the second trait, not only read them, take them out places. They absorb information. Did I tell you this story about my child in Newark? I went to the Newark Museum, and we're standing there. My daughter's 4 years old, and my son's there 2 years old, and people say, it's not a good museum. It's just got statues and pictures and only a tiny kids museum. Well, they didn't even like the kids museum. They wanted to go out and see the naked statues. Oh, look at that. I start giggling. You know, they had a lot of fun. But then my daughter's standing there, and we're looking at this big painting in the front there. I had no idea what this was. If you ever see any painters get paid for this when they just throw paint up against the wall and they move it with their hands, that's 15 grand. I like to do that for a living. You know, I'd like to get some money for that. That's what I thought it was. And then all of a sudden, my son Jordan, he's just standing there going, duck, duck, and pointing like, duck. And I'm like, okay, Jordan, it's a duck. And Hallie's like, where, Jordan? And then if you turn your head slightly, it's an upside-down bill of a duck, a yellow bill in the picture. They pick up things you wouldn't believe. And you notice, and my kid loves ants and worms. Ants, he just wants to go hunting for ants. And, you know, what most people would do is, it's an ant, you know. It's a tree. They see the first thing in their life, a tree, big tree, it's a tree. Yeah, it's just like everybody else. It's the first time they're so enthusiastic about it. It's fresh in their mind. I mean, enthusiasm, fostering as a child is the most important thing. So we talked about the lessons of reading to your children, of educating them, of spending time with them outside of the house and taking them places when they're 2 years old because of how much they pick up, how much they learn. And it's the same message for us. The two things he said for children of constant reading and constant recognition is what we need to elevate us. We all crave recognition from our peers of doing well, of getting awards in front of people from really hard work. But mind investments, one of the top things all these high achievers did is they invested back in here.
The brain must be stimulated and exercised for it to function at its highest capacity. Appropriate programming and stimulation are needed even from early infancy. The latest brain research has concluded that the earlier we start programming and stimulating brain circuitry, the greater the degree of cognitive potential. According to a $30 million study by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, newborn infants who were given extensive educational experiences in their first, second, and third years showed a definite increase in IQ of almost 6 to 13 points over children not as extensively stimulated. Early stimulation and exercise of the brain can have a dramatic impact in our later years as well. Dr. Dominic Purpura, chairman of the National Foundation for Brain Research, offers this insight.
It's been established in some studies that even the onset of Alzheimer's is delayed in populations where there has been a strong educational component in the early years. It's as if those people have a reserve of good working synapses and connections. If Alzheimer's is going to attack you, it's going to come later and have less of an effect in the early years. Therefore, the more you're doing and continue to do, the more you exercise the brain, the less dramatic the effect of Alzheimer's in its early stages.
Of course, the possibility of getting Alzheimer's disease is not the only reason we want to exercise our brains. It's been estimated that human beings use only somewhere between 5 and 10% of our brain's capacity. So why settle for that? Why not try every possible way of raising that percentage? Science has no idea how far human beings can go if they really try. What they do know is there are definitely ways of improving both intelligence and creativity, two of the most important components in living a successful life. Arthur Fry, scientist and inventor, is extremely interested in the area of creativity. He is fascinated by what he does, and it was this fascination with new products and business applications that led to his invention of the Post-it note. Here is his perspective on the powers of the creative mind.
Creativity is a means that both man and animals have to solve problems that would have stopped them, maybe even kept them from surviving, because they couldn't do something the same old comfortable way. They had to come up with something different. Creativity allows them to do that, and it's because of the way the mind stores information. It's not like a computer. In a computer, if one piece of information is missing, it stops the whole process. The mind stores and can visualize information in patterns. The creative mind doesn't have to have the whole pattern. It can have just a little piece and be able to envision the whole picture in completion. Another thing the creative mind can do is look at an existing pattern and say, oh, I bet I can rip out this part of it and insert this other thing and it will fit. Because we've stored a lot of patterns and a lot of information, all kinds of funny combinations are possible. And the more pieces we have, the more the unconscious mind can call on them when we're stuck.
Everyone has the potential to have a creative mind, not just scientists and artists. We all use our creative brains as children, but the realities and responsibilities of adult life often stifle our creative impulses. High achievers are able to tap into their creative abilities to come up with imaginative solutions to difficult problems. Here are 7 suggestions for exercising your own creative powers. First,
Tap into your humor. Do something crazy, something silly. Let your thinking escape the boundaries of practical reality. If you're in the middle of a difficult problem or project, take a break and simply goof around. You'll come back to the problem relaxed and refreshed and be able to look at it from a new angle. You know, it's interesting, in the diamond industry, there are diamond cutters that sit there and plan a cutting of a large stone for months. They'll sit there and plan where they're going to cut it to get the best possible quality diamond. And they'll do all this planning, and then they'll take 2 or 3 days off and go away and not think anything of the diamond. And then the day they come back, the second they sit in front of that diamond, they make the cut. Because their mind had processed that information and made the connections during that weekend away or that time away from the event. So when they came back, usually that's where they get the most perfect cut of the diamond because it's fresh. Second, give yourself time to find solutions. We all want immediate answers, but they don't always come when we want them to. If a solution doesn't present itself right away, take a break. An answer will probably come to you when you're not consciously thinking about your problem at all. Rich Davidson is Senior Vice Emperor of Playfair Incorporated, a company that teaches everyone from college students to corporate CEOs how to use fun, play, and laughter to stimulate creative thinking. Davidson says that it's important to take breaks for the following 2 reasons.
Number 1 is that studies have shown there's a clear link between laughter and greater creativity. It's also a diversion. We need to give our brains a break from what we're doing and allow an opportunity for other processes in the brain to kick in. Studies have also shown that when you take a break to play, when you laugh a little bit while you're learning, you're more likely to learn the information more fully and retain it longer.
The third creativity exercise is to keep a pad, notebook, or tape recorder with you at all times. How many times have you had an interesting thought or a creative solution while in the car, or on a train or plane, or in the middle of the night when unable to sleep? How many times has that thought or solution gone right out of your head by the time you wake up in the morning or return home from your trip? If you keep a notebook or a tape recorder handy at all times, you don't have to worry about losing what could be a valuable idea. You can keep a small notebook handy in your purse or pocket. And a tape recorder is extremely effective to keep in your car so you can record your great ideas without pulling over or getting into an accident, or beside your bed so you can record your thoughts in the middle of the night without even having to turn on the lights. This is where I usually get my greatest ideas at 3 o'clock in the morning when you wake up and you whisper into that tape recorder something you can use for a lifetime. The fourth creativity exercise is to challenge conventional wisdom. Don't let the fact that something has never been done before stop you from creative thinking and experimentation. In 1943, Edwin Land was at the beach with his young daughter. He was taking photographs of her when, impatient as all young children are, she asked, "Why can't I see the picture now, Daddy?" That question sparked Land's imagination and the invention of the Polaroid camera. Question the things you see around you. Keep asking why not and what if. Don't confuse "this is the way things are now" with "this is the way things must always be." And most important, don't let others' opinions of what you can and cannot do determine your opinions of yourself. Here, listen to this one. Beethoven's teacher told him he was hopeless as a composer. Walt Disney, who went bankrupt several times before he founded Disneyland, was once fired by a newspaper editor for lack of ideas. Lack of ideas. Disney. Louisa May Alcott, author of Little Women, was told by her family that perhaps she ought to look for some work as a servant or a seamstress. And above his fireplace, Fred Astaire kept a memo written in 1933 by the director of his first screen test. The memo read, "Can act, slightly bald, and can dance a little." So much for expert opinion. The fifth creativity exercise is to listen to your own body rhythm. Some people are very creative first thing in the morning, and then slack off as the day goes on. Others are at their best in the middle of the night. Do you know when your most creative time of the day is? Most of us already have a pretty good idea. If you're a morning person, set aside a half an hour first thing, before work if necessary, to write down your goals, create an action plan for the day, week, or month, or solve a sticky problem. If you're a night person, do it before you go to bed and write out an action plan for the following day. The sixth creativity exercise is to get yourself out of that old familiar rut. Although following the same routine day in and day out may be comforting and in some ways efficient, it does not stimulate creative thinking. Sometimes even the smallest change in daily habits will get your mind thinking in new directions. Years ago, a professor was teaching a course over and over again, the same lesson plan, and one morning was buttoning up his shirt and realized that the top button was sewn closed by his daughter. He couldn't button his button. What happened? His fingers went crazy. He lost control. Did you ever notice how many times you button a button? Do you know there's actually maybe 12 or 14 different movements your fingers produce by buttoning one button? But we do it so many times, we take it for granted. We do it naturally. So all of a sudden, his fingers were jolted because he couldn't put it through the hole because his daughter had sewn it closed. Well, he realized how much that we need that jolt to wake us up. So he decided to do the same thing for his class and change the lesson plan around, do something different, wake the students up. When they came in every day, every week, it was something different, so they didn't expect the same old thing. It got them to learn more effectively. See, they actually found out that the fingers have memory. They called it physiological memory, that actually we do something so long that the fingers create the memory that we need a jolt, something to shock us, to wake us up. Things as simple as taking a new route to work, changing your breakfast cereal, or getting a new hairstyle can create new patterns of thinking that stimulate brain activity. And the seventh creativity exercise is to suspend judgment. Disregard the voice inside you that says, "This can never be done." Keep brainstorming, keep persistent, keep going after it. You may come up with some wild, impractical ideas. On the other hand, you may just find you've come up with something really incredible. We're easily caught up in the familiar cycles of our lives. We wake up in the morning and do the same thing over and over again. It's not hard to see why we only use 5% of our brain capacity. The most valuable gift you can ever give yourself is to open your mind and broaden your horizons. Try a new sport, take up a new hobby, learn a foreign language, read poetry, write poetry, listen to reggae music, go to the opera, explore your neighborhood, explore the world, surprise yourself. The most rewarding thing you'll ever hear yourself say is, "I didn't know I could do this." And there's a lot of synergism with everything. Sometimes the thing you thought you couldn't do ends up complementing something else you've been doing a long time. Let in one idea and you let in 1,000. The more we learn, the more we're capable of learning. Ideas snowball on top of each other. Each new idea is built on all the others that have come before. Earl Nightingale called this information age we're living in an era of compounding advancement. Each time you open your mind to new ideas and new ways of thinking, the information that comes into you is perceived much differently than before. You have a whole new foundation on which to create a successful life. You can make no greater investment than an investment into your own mind. You can't expect to withdraw wisdom and information if you don't make any deposits in your mind bank. Start each day thinking, and your mind will continue to think all day. Make the effort. As the scientists have told us, we need to put effort into our mental as well as our physical fitness. That might involve change. Most people are afraid of change. They want to stay with what makes them feel comfortable and secure. But that security may be only an illusion. For instance, many people today claim they have been victims of the bad economy. But many of these people are really victims of their own refusal to change tactics in a changing economy. People are doing the same things they've always done, despite the fact that the environment has changed. The customer's needs have changed, but the company has not changed or adapted. Everyone assumes that what was successful in the past is going to work now. Companies think that way about their business, and individuals think that way about their lives. What they fail to see is that change and risk help us grow. When we stop thinking about what helps us grow, when we stop looking for new ideas or new information, we don't just stay still, we move backwards. Tap into your own brain power, set ambitious goals for yourself, and figure out step-by-step ways to achieve them. When problems arise, write them down on paper and try to come up with as many solutions as you possibly can. Include everything you think of, no matter how silly or impractical. Chances are you'll eventually come up with an idea or a combination of ideas that will work for you. Keep a journal or diary, not for publication, just for yourself. Writing down a problem and its possible solutions in essay form encourages logic, clarity, and organization. Expand your circle of friends and explore new activities, especially those that are not within your everyday routine. If you sit at a desk all day, involve yourself in an outdoor activity. If you're involved in manual labor, give yourself some quiet reading time or listen to calming music. Ask yourself every day, what can I invest in my mind today? What can I do today to contribute to my having a healthier and happier life? Earl Nightingale once told a story of a preacher who was traveling down a long country road. As he was traveling, he passed farm after farm, each one more desolate than the next. The few visible crops were withered and dying. The horses looked sickly, the pigs and chickens scrawny. The preacher drove on, greatly disturbed by what he saw. Finally, after hours of travel along the same road, the preacher came upon an unbelievable sight. Here was a farm that resembled a storybook picture. The grass was green. The corn was growing high and tall. The animals were in the pink of health. The farmer and his wife were sitting on the porch drinking lemonade. The preacher pulled up in amazement, got out of his horse and buggy, and said, I've been driving on this road for hours, and all I've seen on either side of me was desolation. God blessed you with such a beautiful piece of land. And the farmer replied, Yes, preacher, God has blessed us with a beautiful piece of land, but you should have seen it when he had it all to himself. The preacher then realized that every one of the farmers he'd passed had been blessed with a beautiful piece of land. It was what this particular farmer had done with his piece that made the difference. Like those farmers, each of us has been given, free and clear, a beautiful piece of land, our minds. What we put into it determines what we'll get out, and we do become what we think about. Remember, the brightest diamond is often found beneath the roughest stone. If you give up digging too soon, you'll never reap the greatest rewards. Never, ever give up on your own shining potential. It is given to each of us to use or abuse. The choice is yours to make. When we continue, you'll discover more about using the incredible powers of your brain with Diamond Facet number 7, Learning How We Learn. Peak performers are perpetual students. They're constantly experimenting with different modes of learning to discover how they learn best. And you can do the same. When you know how you learn best, you can increase your brain's muscle power, improve your memory, and enhance your creative thinking skills. So join me in the next session, and we'll resume your journey of self-discovery. We have somebody here who's a legend because he's the author of The 1 Minute Manager, which sold over 9 million copies. We have Dr. Ken Blanchard with us, and in a moment, just after the tip of the week, we'll introduce him and get his input on a range of subjects. The tip of the week is, and it ties right into our guest this evening, Dr. Ken Blanchard, is studying everything you can about your product. What do you do? What do you sell? Yourself, your product, a service, everything you can. When we talked a while back about the 900,000 millionaires in that survey that were studied, the one trait they had is they read a lot, they invested themselves in the profession. Even high school dropouts found a vocation they fell in love with. They studied everything they could around them, and that helped them move ahead and move forward, and they became an expert in that field. The more knowledge we have about what we do, the more ideas and solutions we come up with for the people around us. Few people have impacted the day-to-day management of people and companies more than Ken Blanchard. His phenomenal best-selling book, The 1 Minute Manager, has been translated into more than 25 languages and was regarded as one of the most successful business books of all time. In recent years, his books Raving Fans, co-authored with Sheldon Bowles. Everyone is a coach with National Football League coach legend Don Shula, and also Empowerment Takes More Than a Minute with John Carlos and Alan Randolph. These have been mainstays on the Business Week bestseller list. And also the co-author of Mission Possible, which is about becoming a world-class organization while there's still time. He is a down-to-earth person who doesn't think so highly of himself that he can't relate to anybody or talks down to people. He's somebody who is we can learn a lot from. So I welcome him and thank him very much for taking his time to come on the show. Great to have you, Ken.
Thank you, Barry. It's a real pleasure. And I was taking notes as you were giving your opening remarks, and it's just always amazing to me the universal truths that are out there if people would only listen and practice them. In terms of Mission Possible, the last chapter in that book is entitled, Do I Have What It Takes to Live in a Two-Curve World? And what we mean by a two-curve world is the old traditional learning curve is you start to learn something and you wax and wane, you work, and then you finally get up and you get some proficiency, And then if you don't renew yourself, if you're not continually open for learning, then all of a sudden it starts to wane and go downhill.
Right.
And that's the way it is with organizations. And so we're saying you have to start a second curve before the first curve dies. And so the interesting problem that organizations have, and we do as individuals too, is you have to constantly be trying to improve your present operation while creating your future almost at the same time, because the future is on top of the present all the time. So as an individual performer, you're constantly trying to get better, but you better have your head up and look out and see what's going on, because today is the only time in the history of business or anything I've ever seen where you could be great at what you do and be out of business tomorrow.
I was reading the book, and I tell you, one thing about your books is they're very easy to read. You have stories, samples, acronyms, everything to help people apply and take the information out of the book into the real world. And I'd like to say, what would be the most, maybe 2 or 3 ideas or lessons so we're not going down that bell-shaped curve you talked about where you're going down after you reached a plateau?
Well, so that you're growing your whole life. You know, I had the great joy of working with Norman Vincent Peale for 2 years and wrote a book on ethics. And when I met him, he was 86 years old. And I said, Norman, what keeps you going? He said, I am so excited about every single day about what I might learn. And he says, I want to work with you because I think I can learn new things. You know, here he is, 86 years old, trying to learn new things. And I want to tell you, he was the most vital person right down till 3 months before he died quietly in his sleep on Christmas Eve at 95 years old. So I have a new image. I'm going to die quietly, Barry, on Christmas Eve when I'm 95 years old, which means I got a good another 38 years to go. And that's exciting, though, to see that you can constant learning machine. So you not only want to be good at what you're doing now, but you want to be constantly looking around and learning and being open to new ideas, because it can give you a chance to go in a different way.
Some people acquire valuable gems, put them away in a safe deposit box, and never enjoy their full value or beauty. You can do the same with your diamond mind if you wish. Or you can, like most successful people, constantly increase the power and value of your most precious jewel. A diamond, in its natural state, is cloudy and unshaped. Its value is determined by how it's cut, shaped, and set into a specific context. Same with our precious diamond minds. How we shape the mind, the learning systems we set up, determines the level at which the brain will function. In order for it to function at its maximum capacity, we must set up optimal learning systems and discover how to apply our knowledge to the challenges of daily living. In other words, we need to learn how we learn. In recent years, scientists, psychologists, and educators have begun to broaden their focus of study to include not only what we learn, but how we learn it. How do human beings take in information? How do we retrieve it? And how can we use this knowledge to increase our capacity for learning and unlocking our hidden potential? Most of us are born with great capacities to learn. We're not all intellectually equal, but we are all able to take in new information to form ideas to change our lives. Learning is an equal opportunity employer. In some respects, we can't stop ourselves from learning. We learn simply by living. All of our senses provide us with information. We observe, we interact, we experiment, we experience. Studies have recently shown that infants, even as young as 2.5 months, can learn and remember visual sequences and simple mechanical tasks. 5-month-olds can grasp the basic concepts of addition and subtraction. 6-month-olds can recognize language long before they know how to speak. Infants even seem to have an innate understanding of the law of physics, of how the world is supposed to work, such as the fact that objects can't hang in midair by themselves or pass through solid barriers. If this is how much we're capable of before we're even 1 year old, imagine what the adult mind can do. So if we all have this tremendous potential, why do some people do so much better than others in school? The answer is simple. It's because schools are not set up to bring out our individual differences. They're set up to teach all children in the same way, even though we all have different ways of thinking and learning. Mary Madeline was deputy campaign manager for President George Bush in the 1992 campaign. She was responsible for the overview and organization of all 50 state operations. She is extremely articulate and intelligent, yet she feels her education let her down, and she wants people to understand that our education system is not infallible.
I know teaching has changed a lot since I've been there, but they did not teach me the right way. The way I was taught, you learned facts and you regurgitated them. Success was measured as a good grade on a test. That is not how the world works. That's not how I learn. I happen to be a visual learner, which I had to discover by myself. Well, if a law professor is standing up in front of a class reading something to me, I don't get it. But if someone holds up a graph or shows me a picture, I readily understand it. If you're reading and you don't understand something, that doesn't mean you're stupid. Read it, then take a pencil and draw what you've read. People don't understand that there are ways of learning beyond the traditional one we're taught.
Mary Madeline is absolutely right. Studies have shown that there are 3 ways we take in information: auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. Some people respond best to auditory cues such as lectures and reading. Some need to see pictures of graphic representations, and some respond best when they're actually able to touch or have hands-on experience. Each of us has one dominant mode of dealing with the world. If a person is visual, like Mary Madeline, telling her what to do will never be as effective as showing her what to do. Now, in addition to the 3 modes of taking in information, there are also 7 different kinds of intelligence. Spatial, as demonstrated by architects and interior designers. Kinesthetic, as demonstrated by dancers and athletes. Musical, as demonstrated by composers, classical musicians, and rock stars. Empathic, as demonstrated by therapists, guidance counselors, and social workers. Logical, as demonstrated by lawyers and researchers. Linguistic, as demonstrated by writers and speakers. And mathematical, as demonstrated by accountants and engineers. What does all this mean? Now that it's been determined that there are 7 categories of intelligence, am I stuck with the one I've got? If I have a mathematical mind, does that mean I'm pigeonholed forever because of some innate talent I possess? Not at all. Because in the end, it's not our intelligence category nor our particular talents that shape us. It's how we choose to shape them that counts. Dr. Robert Bjork, chairman of Dartmouth College's Department of Psychology and chairman of the National Academy of Sciences Committee on Techniques for the Enhancement of Human Performance, researches how we learn and how we best apply our knowledge to real-life situations. Dr. Bjork's studies have led him to believe that there is something fundamentally wrong with the methods we have traditionally used to study new subjects and learn new tasks, especially when it comes to long-term retention of facts and skills. His studies indicate that training procedures in all types of situations are far less productive than they could be. Here's what he's found.
I can get you to improve more rapidly if I fix some of the conditions under which I have you practice or test and then keep them constant. You'll improve much more quickly, but that will be disastrous in terms of long-term real-world performance. Now, not only does it produce worse retention, it produces an inability to transfer your training and perform appropriately in new or altered conditions. What should happen during training is that I should keep changing the conditions under which you practice. That'll slow down your acquisition, but it'll actually accomplish the kind of learning, understanding, and ability to generalize that we're after.
Dr. Bjork gives an example. Suppose you're a typical golfer who goes to the range to hit balls. You stand on a platform that's completely level. You hit a dozen 5-iron shots 10 seconds apart. You're not really aiming at anything. The shots look beautiful. So what do you do with the next one? You try to reproduce, based on short-term muscle memory, what you just did. And you probably hit another good one. Then a few days later, you're playing a round of golf with your friends, making terrible shots and saying, "I can't believe this. Just a few days ago, I was hitting the ball so well." What happened? You're not taking into consideration the conditions on the course. Will anybody let you hit a dozen 5-irons in a row 10 seconds apart from a perfectly level line? Of course not. And the wind is blowing. There's trees on the course. Everything's different. What's more, you're now aiming at something and there's a little money on it. See, before you were practicing under conditions that will never be available when you're actually playing the game. You won't be able to rely on short-term muscle memory to repeat exactly what you did. Your practice, no matter how diligent, had nothing to do with how the game is really played. This is the problem with much of the teaching we get in school and the training we get in vocational courses and corporate seminars. The training and the practice contexts are so different and so far from overlapping real-life situations. So here are two important hints to effective study or practice. First, practice under conditions that simulate reality, with all of its messes and complications. And second, spread out your study or practice over time. Going over something more than once in study sessions that are spaced out in time and separated by other activities produces far better long-term memory than a cram session ever could. Learning how we learn is not only important for each individual, but for our society as a whole. In fact, some experts feel that until we improve our educational and training systems, America will remain far behind in a technologically advancing world. It may be that in our society, too much emphasis has been put on the kind of learning that has typically taken place in school, where subjects are clearly laid out and assigned for us, and we're expected to do little more than memorize and recall facts and figures, names and dates. Creative thinking is often stifled and sometimes actively discouraged. The good news is that some schools are changing. There's much more emphasis on the techniques of solving problems instead of just producing the right answer. But we are still sorely lacking in educating ourselves and our children on how to learn, a concern of great importance to Dr. William H. Danforth, Chancellor of Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. Dr. Danforth is an expert both in education and business. He's a trustee of the American Youth Foundation and is on the board of directors of the Ralston Purina Company and the McDonnell Douglas Corporation. Here are his thoughts on the subject.
The single most important thing that you can do for yourself is learn how to learn. The way the world is changing, one is going to have to go on learning and adapting all one's life. The facts that you learn in school won't carry you very long. You have to learn how to get information, how to analyze and evaluate what you see and hear. One thing I tell every incoming class is that no one can learn for you, any more than someone else can eat for you. Learning is really a do-it-yourself affair. Teachers are just helpers, like coaches. You have to do it yourself, and you have to train yourself to do it.
Part of that training is to redefine what we mean by education and to readjust our attitudes toward learning. The most successful people in our society are not necessarily those who have the best formal education. Some did very poorly in school. Some never even graduated from high school or college. But somewhere along the road to success, their attitude about learning changed. They were quick to learn the lessons that life taught them about themselves, about other people, and about human nature. They practiced the skills they needed over and over again and learned new ones whenever necessary. They didn't give up when the practice became boring or the learning difficult. They apprenticed themselves to masters in their field whenever possible. They read whatever they can get their hands on, seeking out any and all information they could find on a particular area of interest and expertise. But above all, they learned to appreciate the value of learning itself. This kind of attitude, this willingness to be a perpetual student, often leads to unexpected discoveries. Just ask Art Fry, who attends seminars several times a month. One day, Fry was singing in a church choir in St. Paul and tried to mark his place in the choir's songbook. He suddenly remembered a seminar he had attended months earlier, where he had learned about a unique low-tack adhesive. Fry wondered if he could use this adhesive to make a bookmark. Here's what happened.
It turned out to be perfect for paper. Had it been stickier, it would have pulled the fibers off. If it had been less sticky, it would not have held itself in place. Making the bookmark led me down the path of further discovery to the fact that they were great self-attaching notes.
And that's how the seemingly simple yet exceedingly useful Post-it note was born. And the key was Fry's desire to keep learning new things, combined with his ability to recall and apply that new information. As several people interviewed for this session have stated, success in the future will depend on your ability to learn and adapt to changing times. When you learn something new, it doesn't automatically mean that you add on to existing knowledge. That's why memory is so important to the learning process. Dr. Bjork feels that the one key reason why people don't realize their capacities is because we think of ourselves as some kind of recording device. When someone explains something to us, or we sit passively in a classroom, we expect that we're going to record that information through some kind of human video camera. But as Dr. Bjork explains, that's just not true.
As a matter of fact, we don't work anything like a videotape recorder. The way we learn something new is to relate it or fit it into those things we already know. A good analogy for human memory is that it's like a scaffolding structure, where the more knowledge you have in a given domain, the more ways there are to interpret new things. Knowledge creates the capacity for additional knowledge.
Human beings have a phenomenal capacity to take in new information, providing that we have the pre-existing knowledge to interpret and store new ideas. Problems sometimes arise, though, when we try to access things that we have learned. Do you ever hear people complain that they have difficulty learning new things because they have a terrible memory? Perhaps you've said it yourself. I used to. But now I'd like to share with you a simple exercise I learned that helped me develop my memory muscle. I was an average student in high school. Although my parents always wanted me to study, I rarely did. I didn't even take it too seriously. I took a year off after high school and went back to school when I realized how important education would be for my future. I actually took a year off to find myself. You know, one of those find myself deals. Well, I found myself working a lot of hours in a catering place doing dishes. I actually wanted to become a chef. I couldn't even cook an egg on a Saturday night, but that was something I figured I'd go into. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Well, I was speaking to the chef one night and talking about what he did, and I was interested in maybe artistic designs and the ice carvings and some other things that go along with making food. Well, he looked at me and said, "You know, Barry, for 30 years I've been doing this, and I hated every day of it." It was one of my great mentors, by the way. It was a mentor who told me to get the heck out of there and go back to school. Well, I did. I started realizing how important education would be for my future. And this time I studied because I wanted to, not because it was my parents' idea. And I made the dean's list for the first time, which blew him away. One of the reasons I was able to do so well was because of a non-credit course called Learning Techniques, which was without a doubt the most useful course I ever took throughout my schooling. We're all taught the basics in math, science, and business, but you rarely see a program teaching people how to actually learn these subjects. A tremendous teacher, Adolf Caprioli, taught the class how to read more effectively and the best ways to take a test. He taught us how to think, cognitive levels of thinking, how to understand situations more clearly. He also talked about memory techniques, in particular one called mnemonics. He taught us an exercise which, when practiced, can enhance your memory by as much as 50%. Here's how it works. You can begin to master this technique by memorizing the following numbered word combinations in order. 1 sun, 2 shoe, 3 tree, 4 door, 5 hive, 6 sticks, 7 heaven, 8 gate, 9 vine, 10 hen. It's not difficult to memorize this list because the words rhyme with the numbers, and you're learning them in order. I'll go through them again, and this time I'd like you to repeat each number and word after me. 1 sun, 2 shoe, 3 tree, 4 door, 5 hive, 6 sticks, 7 heaven, 8 gate, 9 vine, and 10 hen. Now pause the program and go through the list in your mind until you feel that you know it well. Okay, this list is going to help you remember another list of words or items, having no relation to each other, given to you in a completely random order. Ask a friend to give you any 10 words right off the top of their head. Suppose the first word your friend gives you is tractor. Think of number 1, sun, then form a picture of the sun and the tractor. The more creative you are in your mental picture and the more action that's involved in the picture, the better you're going to retain the word. For example, you might picture the sun beating down on the tractor. It's so hot that the yellow paint on the tractor is melting, causing the field to start burning. So now you've got a fiery tractor sitting out in the hot sun in the middle of a burning field. The second word your friend gives you is birthday. Go back to the original list and think of number 2, shoe. Picture yourself having a birthday party. You take a bite of the cake, and inside is an old shoe. You can taste it. You're chewing on the leather and the laces are hanging from your mouth. Continue to create pictures for each of the remaining 8 words your friend gives you. When you're finished, you can repeat the list of 10 randomly chosen words back to her easily, although she's probably forgotten 1 or 2 of them herself. Not only that, if she asks what word number 2 was, you can quickly answer birthday. And if she asks what number birthday was, you'll know immediately it was number 2. This exercise is a way of teaching one of the most important elements of improving memory, association. In his book, Care and Feeding of the Brain, Jack McGuire says that our ability to remember something well rests on 3 principles: repetition, interest, and association. The more you repeat something, the better you remember it. The more interested you are in a subject, the easier you will remember it, because you already have some of the scaffolding built on which to attach new facts. But perhaps the strongest memory links are associations, connections we deliberately create between new information and information that is already familiar to us. If you want to remember a name, a date, or any information at all, it's much easier if you associate a new piece of information with something you already know. Another strong example of association is what scientists call state-bound knowledge. As McGuire explains it, every time we learn something new, it becomes attached to the state of consciousness in which we learned it. For example, if you learn someone's name at a party at which you had a particularly good time, that knowledge becomes attached to the state of consciousness you were in at the time of the party. If you want to recall that person's name, try to recreate the mood you were in at the party, and the name will come to you. This goes right back to Dr. Bjork's suggestion of practicing under real-life conditions. If you learn a new task in one state of consciousness or environment, and you try to apply that task under totally different conditions, you will have a very difficult time. Therefore, you must either change the conditions under which you practice, or strongly evoke your practice environment during real-life performance. Association is not only useful in learning facts, it is also an essential element of learning to be successful. Remember the phrase, "You become what you think about"? Here it is again. Successful people are able to visualize themselves being successful, but that doesn't mean they started out that way. Many had low self-esteem and basic insecurities when they were young. Eventually, they were able to learn to see themselves as successful, building each small success on the one before it. There are many examples of how this combination of visualization and association breeds success. Author Gerald Jampolsky became well known for using imagery in working with terminally ill children in Marin County, California. Some people in the Marin County school system read about Jampolsky in the newspaper and wondered if the same process would work with their remedial reading classes. So Jampolsky tested about 20 children with reading problems, and he tested a control group of another 20 children. He took the children with reading problems through a visualization process. He had them close their eyes, and here's what he told them.
Imagine going into an elevator up to the 10th floor, stepping out into the lobby of a movie theater. Go over to the corner of the movie theater and you will see a bathtub. Kneel down and unzip the top of your head. Pull out your brain and wash all the negative thoughts out of it. Thoughts like, "I can't read," "It's too hard," or "I'm too stupid." Then put your brain back. Now, walk into the theater, sit in a chair, and watch the movie of yourself reading well. Now get out of the chair and step into the movie. Look out at the book through your own eyes. You feel good. You hear the sound of your teacher's voice. You hear yourself sounding out the words phonetically. You see your parents smiling because you read so well. Now, come back out of the theater and open your eyes.
Jampolsky then gave each student a cassette recorder and asked them to make a 5-minute recording in their own words of what they just experienced. The children took their tapes home and listened to them for 60 days, every morning when they got up and every night before they went to sleep. At the end of 2.5 months, Jampolsky tested the children in this group and the children in the control group. The children in the control group had improved 1.5 months' worth in their reading skills. But listen to this. The group that did the imaging and listened to their tapes improved their reading skills by 1.5 to 2.5 years' worth. Their visualizations and associations had allowed these children to rise way above their own and their teachers' expectations. Of course, the one thing that this story leaves out is that all the while these children were imagining their success and listening to their tape recorders, they were also actively working on improving their skills. You can improve your chances for success through your mental processes, but unless they are accompanied by action, your dreams will remain unfulfilled. We learn to do something by doing it. There is no other way. Dr. Bjork provides an extreme example of the truth in this statement.
How many times have you sat in an airplane and watched the stewardess demonstrate how to work an inflatable life vest? Many times. Imagine, however, that the plane's down in the water and it's dark and there's a smell of smoke and people are screaming. What are the chances that you're going to put that thing on right and remember what to pull and what side goes front and what you blow in to inflate it? All of those exposures where you were told what to do accomplish very little. In fact, almost no procedural learning. If there was one tryout where you actually got to do it, that would be worth more than all of those passive exposures.
We hear, we forget. We see, we remember. But we do, we understand. In any learning procedure, the more we get involved and jump into the job, the experiment, the sport, whatever it is, that's when we really start learning the information. We learn with our entire bodies. It's as if the information goes into every cell, not only in our brains. The greatest learning experience is experience. As Dr. Danforth so aptly put it, learning is definitely a do-it-yourself affair. Another do-it-yourself affair is goal setting, the 8th diamond facet. When we continue in the next session, you'll learn how to set goals for achieving everything we've already discussed. The key to progressing on your road to success and reaching your goals is to take it one step at a time. And the first step is learning how to create compelling goals, as you'll discover in Session 9.